Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the Director of Media at the Foundation for Economic Education, and of course, the creator of Out of Frame on YouTube. Here today, not in studio anymore, with Paul Nelson, our Senior Marketing Manager and Head of Social Media, and of course, Jen Maffasanti, who is the Director of Communications at the Libertas Institute in Utah. How are you guys doing today? Jen, how's your Utah weather treating you right now?
It's weird right now. Today we're looking at a high of 55, and then Wednesday it's supposed to snow. So
I've been enjoying Atlanta's warmness at the moment. Paul, how are you feeling?
It's still cold. It's still too cold for me. I need it to be low 70s throughout every day for rest of time. Which reminds me of this. We're recording this. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, you obviously will be hearing this post Valentine's Day, but I'm coming off a Super Bowl party. A little tired, guys. I'm a little tired. A lot of Cincinnati chili was consumed.
Why?
On some chili dogs.
Okay, wait. So let's get this. We got to get this straight right now. Did you have Cincinnati chili in that you ate it on spaghetti? In the insane way?
I don't think
that is literally what Cincinnati chili is.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Cincinnati chili.
No,
chili.
It's part of. It's all part of the thing. The dish is
Cincinnati
spaghetti.
chili is on.
Well, there's
spaghetti, which is
you had
disgusting.
I mean, you had what I hope was good hot dog chili on chili dogs, which is different.
Yes,
that's not Cincinnati chili.
Yeah. Yes, I mean it's Cincinnati style chili,
right? Like a ground beef, like a really finely ground beef chili. Yeah, which is perfect for a hot dog. Right? Like that's exactly what you want for a chili dog. It's just not at all what you want on a pile of spaghetti.
On spaghetti.
Oh my God. I'm pretty sure Cincinnati chili is a hate crime. It's a joke, everyone. It's a joke. It's not actually a hate crime.
It's a joke.
It's not good though.
But it's definitely not okay.
So the Super Bowl party is a big deal in my family. Has been for my entire life. So what we usually try to do is make food that corresponds to the city that plays are playing. Yeah. So obviously Cincinnati chili was on the menu, and the last two. For those that don't know, might have been able to guess this being where I'm from, but I'm a very big Kansas City Chiefs fan, and so the last couple of years the Chiefs have played in the Super Bowl, and so it was a lot of ribs. But no, the Chiefs had to blow the second half lead and make me make Cincinnati chili.
But see, you still didn't bring yourself to actually do it the way they would have. That you should have done it if you're really serious about doing Cincinnati chili.
I appropriated Cincinnati culture.
And I think that this. I'm here for it as well. I think that this is a perfectly valid way to take the one reasonably good aspect of Cincinnati chili and use it in a form that actually makes sense. I'm fully supportive of that. I think you can take ideas from wherever they come, and I think you did the right thing. I think if you'd done it the real look, my family has a tradition going back to when I was probably before I was even born, which I love, and I would actually highly encourage other people to do, which is to take. Every Christmas Eve, we do a national or sort of traditional dish from a different culture from around the world. As we did this the entire time I lived with my parents. We're a little bit lapsed on some of these just because, moving away from people and stuff made it a little bit hard to do that all the time. But I still try to carry this on as many years as I can as an adult. And but I will say it's led to some disasters here and there, right? Because we're taking the good with the bad on these things. Like you do Sweden, you end up with lutefisk, and lutefisk.
Nobody in Sweden actually.
I don't think anybody does
anymore. It's just That's just a prank.
I think that is absolutely correct. But we did it, and my dad made it, and he basically what you do is you take a piece of cod or some kind of whitefish, and you soak it in some kind of a lye solution, like you would soak a pretzel before you bake it, and the fish turns into a really, really disgusting fish jelly. It's basically just fish gelatin at the end of this process. It doesn't taste very good. Its texture is wildly worse than the taste. It is like eating fish flavored snot, I guess I would say. I would say that's pretty much like that, that's pretty much what that experience was like. But we did it, and we experienced it. And I was probably 10, 11 years old when we did that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a little bit older. But in general, I applaud my family for taking the leap on making those experiences possible for a 10-year-old me. I'm glad I had that experience. So now I know what not to do. I know that there are many things from Swedish culture that are fantastic. Lingonberries, like anything you do with lingonberries, fantastic. On the other hand, lutefisk, not a good one. So we'll just leave that over there. We don't need that one anymore. That's cultural appropriation that will not be happening again. We'll not appropriate that part of that culture. But I think that's fine. We can pick and choose. I think it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of appropriating culture, we're going to be talking about Boba Fett today.
Boy, does that ever.
And a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm sorry I had that transition. I wanted
That's
to go
a solid
with it,
transition,
so.
actually.
And I called it audible.
Go for it.
I think this is a really good way to talk about a lot of modern Star Wars in general, is that Star Wars is a culture that was created, decades ago, and has had some highlights and some lowlights in the last 40 years. But also now it does feel like it's just being appropriated by people who don't really understand it and who are sort of turning it into something else. And it's not always great. Obviously, we're big fans of The Mandalorian, and I think everybody in general is a pretty big fan of The Mandalorian. On the other hand, we have The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and that whole business. So you got to deal with that. The Book of Boba Fett to me feels a little bit like it's trying to bridge the gap between Mandalorian and those movies. There are a few little sort of hints of that in there, which I think definitely make the story worse. But in general, this just feels a little weak. That's where I would start, I think. So, I don't know. Let's talk about initial reactions. The whole series is done now. We've been doing live streams basically after every episode. So we talked about this quite a bit on Discord at this point. By the way, if you're a listener, you are eligible. Anybody is eligible to join our Discord. So check the links in the description for that. But we were doing live streams where we talk about the show and take some questions. I don't know, Jen, what are your, now that we've watched all of it, full thoughts?
Yeah. Now that I've watched the entire series and I've let it marinate for a little while now, I really got to say that this was filled with missed opportunities. Like, it could have been so cool. It could have been so exciting, and they could have really started to fill in the gaps between, okay, the Death Star has been destroyed and the Empire is defeated, and then 30 years later, kidding, now we have it back and it's worse. But
yeah, there's that's actually weird too, because for the little bits of story that we got with this, I guess this spoiler, but I feel like everybody has to know this by this point, but the Luke Skywalker stuff, because Luke showed up at the end of last season of Mandalorian. He's a little bit in this series as well. Not much, just a little bit. And most of the scenes we got there were trying to bridge the gap between that and The Last Jedi, building his temple and things that we saw in the school that he was building and all that kind of stuff. I have no idea exactly where they're going with that, or if they'll sort of course correct on any of the stuff from The Last Jedi. It doesn't really look like they're trying to, which is a little disappointing. Because I think they actually could, right? Like, I think they have an opportunity to sort of course correct there, but I don't think they're going to.
No, I don't think they are either. And like, it could have been so cool, but instead we just get these really like lame characters. Like, they don't do anything awesome except for like maybe in the last episode, but you didn't really set that up properly. So it was just like, well, now we've got, you know, King Kong Rancor
Paul,
running around. Like,
let me challenge you, Paul. Name one new character that we have not seen in previous mediums. I'll say mediums because there's some from the animated series. Name me one new character from this series that was good.
That was good?
Or even give me one of their names. Do you remember the name of any of the Boba Fett's Power Rangers mod squad?
I think the only
gang.
The Tuskens back in before, you know, the Tuskens were interesting, but I don't think
they didn't really have characters,
credited names.
No.
That's pretty much it. The Vespa gang was, I mean, like it's pretty much this entire show could have been interesting. There's some interesting ideas that you could explore there, but it just handled so poorly.
As did their Vespa. So I also handled very, very poorly.
For sure.
Well, it was very stable. So
like,
these dangerous modders have very stable.
They
Vespas.
had like hover rounds that like you couldn't tip over if you tried, which also made it seem like there was no danger or excitement to anything that they ever did. There was an article from a blog called Dread Pennies. It's Graham Bradley's blog. I don't know if you saw this or
I did, and I read it this morning.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic post on this blog. At first goes through the criticisms of Book of Boba Fett, like all of which I share emphatically, I feel like. And then it goes on to actually offer a sort of a retcon of the entire series, and to do it again with a different plot that actually took all of the same beats, or took a lot of the core beats and did it better. I would argue. I think it did it better. But the one thing he said about the Vespa people, I want to read a little bit of this. He said, "If you've ever been stuck in Portland, these people look familiar to you. Now, maybe cyborgs in Star Wars are nothing new. They've just never been this pointless, bad, stupid, obnoxious, or a waste of oxygen. Nobody likes them. Nobody is impressed by them. They do nothing. Seriously, they're a bunch of unemployed Zoomers who complain about the cost of stuff, yet they've got expensive cyborg mods, and their stupid little space bikes have ridiculously loud paint jobs, and are the only things in Mos Espa not covered in sand." And he goes on to mock the girl's arm in particular, which I actually didn't really even think about that much until the final episode, when I realized that she had a hand on top of a robot arm. And so he asks, did they cut her arm off, give her a robot arm, and then stick her human hand back on? Where's the blood circulation come from? The sense receptors? Or is it a cyborg hand like Luke's covered in fake skin? If so, why cover the hand but leave the rest of the arm exposed? These are small questions, but they sort of, for me, there are a lot of those questions that really stack up over time in this series.
Yeah. And they're also indicative of a deeper problem, which is you didn't think this through.
No, there was no thought given to a lot of these kinds of choices, and it really feels off to me, especially when I look at it in the context of having been written. I think every episode was written by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and I'm struggling to see how that makes sense in the context of this, because they obviously they wrote all the Mandalorian episodes. They don't have these kinds of problems in general. Like, you don't see a lot of these things, like characters that like just don't make any sense. One of the things that really drove me nuts, and we talked about at the beginning of like the first couple episodes, especially when we meet the Vespa gang, is that their big complaint is the guy is like overpriced, overcharging for water, and so their complaint is that water's too expensive. Well, first of all, it's a desert planet, so water is probably pretty expensive on this planet, and so it probably is something that would have like a black market or have, a pretty strong incentives for people to steal or to hoard or, to do these kinds of things. And yet when they go around their little Mario Kart race, they knock over like 1 million gallons of water, and it just goes into the desert and nobody cares. Like, it's the weirdest thing. It's like, on the one hand, water is so scarce that it's the most expensive thing and they're complaining about it. And then literally 5 minutes later, they can plow through a barrel of water, which apparently people just keep outside uncovered and unsecured. And it's fine. Nobody cares. And it's those kinds of things that you go, like, that starts to eat away at the credibility of the world. And it starts to really eat away at like anything that actually sort of semblance of sense in this universe. It was weak.
Yeah. I strongly suspect that, I don't know, Disney's board of directors were just uncredited writers.
This felt a lot like there was like Kathleen Kennedy meddling in it. It definitely felt a lot more. I mean, I coming back to the Vespa people. I'm sorry, I'm like stuck on these Vespa kids, but like, why put them in the show, right? Like, they feel like a play to capture like a youth audience or to appeal to a certain generation or a certain demographic or something like that. Like, that's the only real good explanation I can think of as far as why you would want to include them, because they don't otherwise add anything. And they actually detract from a lot of the other things that were interesting. Paul, you're right. You've been right from the beginning that the Tusken Raider stuff is actually some of the more interesting stuff that happens in the first 3 episodes. But we keep cutting away from that to like Mos Espa stuff that's boring, which is lame.
Yeah, and there wasn't really any payoff. I know he uses bantha stick to not kill Cad Bane because it's Star Wars. But I had an interesting relationship with this show because going into it when it was first announced after season 2 of Mando, I didn't care. I don't care about Boba Fett the character.
Right.
And when the season started, we talked about this on the Discord, but I was the only one that was interested by the Tusken Raider stuff. And so my interest was peaking. And then we got to episodes when we went to the Mandalorian side of the thing, and I was like, okay, they're going to bring it all together. You got to stick the landing. And then Robert Rodriguez comes in with one of the worst episodes of television I've seen in a long time for the season finale. And that got me thinking, I'm like, wow, this was the season finale was really bad. And I'm surprised Robert Rodriguez is the one that directed it. And so then I went back through and looked at the directors, and he directed 3 of the episodes this season, and it was episode 1, 3, I believe, and the 6, the season finale. And those were the 3 worst 100%. Episodes of this season. And that kind of surprised me. And I don't know, has he lost his fastball? Kind of seems like it. And what was on screen, oh gosh, was pretty bad. So little of it,
also very little of it felt like, I don't know. Look, Robert Rodriguez has always been a little bit. So there's 2 sides to Robert Rodriguez, right? Like, there's Desperado and El Mariachi and like Once Upon a Time in Mexico and Machete Kills and all that kind of Planet Terror, right? There's all that stuff, which I love. Like, I love all of that. But there's also Spy Kids, right? And Spy Kids 4D and things of that nature that Robert Rodriguez has done. And that's all fine, right? Like, it's totally, I mean, look, Jon Favreau also directed Elf and Zathura, and he's done some kids movies, right? And so I get that there's, you can put on those different kind of hats, right? If you're a director And especially, I think we've seen this over the years with directors when they have kids. A lot of times, want to make something for kids, or they want to make something that's actors do the same thing, right? Like you'll see an actor who's like a hardcore, action movie star, somebody who's known for really violent stuff. And then suddenly they'll pop up in a kid's movie, and it's probably because they have a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, and that happens a lot. But like this show could have used, Desperado Rodriguez. Like this is what this needed. Because it should be a show about a crime lord who came at it from being a imperial bounty hunter. He should be one of the baddest guys that you've ever seen. And he's not. And then Danny Trejo gets brought in as this Rancor trainer for like 2 seconds. And it's like, I'm supposed to be happy with it because Danny Trejo appeared. Like I'm just supposed to be happy about it because he's there. Not because he does anything cool. He doesn't even do anything. He just stands in front of the Rancor and talks for 4 minutes and then leaves. And then that's the end of that's like the end of Danny Trejo in the show. Like it's weird. Like that stuff is, and then by the way, come back to this Dread Pennies thing, by the way, talking about the guy, like the mayor's aide or his like emissary or whatever, the Twilight guy. Like he just says, shoot this idiot. Jar Jar, someone is coming for the title dog. And it is absolutely true. We got like 30 scenes with that guy over the course of the series.
It was deeply, deeply disappointing that character did not die a grisly death. Like he should have been eaten by that Rancor. 100%.
So I thought almost for certain, I was pretty confident. There's a point at which Boba sends him out with a message, knowing that the message is basically like, up yours to the people that he's delivering the message to the Pike.
Should have been dead there. But I would have held out for the Rancor. I would have held out for the Rancor for
that too, but I just feel like I thought for sure that would be the moment. Like finally, Boba has had enough of this guy being useless. Like finally.
Once again, missed opportunities.
Totally. Well, but that guy, it's so weird. Like the amount of screen time that goes to certain things, but then not to other things in this series. Like it's just so strange. And then there are many, many things that are sort of set up that just never get paid off at all.
There were.
Yeah.
It was not great.
Well, and then.
Yeah, this
or that got paid off and never were set up to begin with. So like, it's a whole mess.
So while the writers were Favreau and Filoni, there was very different directors, and from what I've heard, Favreau was rarely on set, and I'm not sure about Filoni.
Filoni only directed one episode. Felt like this whole series, I think.
Right. So it felt like each episode was different, and you get the Mandalorian episode where he's on that space station, which is totally different feel than the entire other part of the series. And you get this episode with Grogu training with Luke, which is just another
that was Filoni's episode.
Type of feeling, and then all the Robert Rodriguez terribleness that just feels like totally different. And it's kind of a microcosm of Disney Star Wars, where you should have one overarching creative vision, but instead there's for some reason you don't get it, and you get these different, very weird combination of things that are supposed to go together. Then you get things just don't make sense.
Yeah. So I do want to give a shout out to Bryce Dallas Howard though, because her episode, which was basically the Mandalorian episode, fantastic. Excellent episode.
It really was.
And that episode, like just by itself, was a great story, right? Like it was a tiny little version of a series of the Mandalorian, in that like he starts out bounty hunting, starts out like doing something, and then ends up actually going through several locations and trying to, deal with, go back to his people, other Mandalorians, and deal with armor and Beskar and all that kind of stuff. And it's like just a little mini version of like a Mandalorian series. And it had a full complete story in that one episode. And I thought Bryce Dallas Howard handled that super well.
Absolutely. And to put a cherry on top of that one, the Mandalorian cutting his own leg open with his own lightsaber in the middle of a fight is probably the most relatable thing I've ever seen in a Star Wars property.
Yeah, it is.
Stop.
There was a I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it was Corridor Digital, but I'm not sure. There's like a YouTube channel that does visual effects, and that's why I kind of feel like it was probably Corridor that did a short film of like lightsaber training, and it was sort of the final test that Padawan students needed to go through to be sort of granted a rank as Jedi that were cleared to use lightsabers and whatnot. And like the whole story is basically like the guy goes through several iterations where he just gets cut in half, or like his arm gets cut off, or like a leg gets cut off, or whatever. And then they have like medical droids just like zip in and just like reattach limbs and reattach body parts and stuff. It's just like, but yeah, honestly, I don't know how you train with something like that, because you would immediately be
well, I'm sure there's a very deep nerd answer for it, like something's alive or something like that, the Force, the midichlorians, all that stuff. And please put it, shoot us a message on Discord to let us know, because my guess is that it's that. There's probably an answer.
Well, speaking of Star Wars, some of the Star Wars lore, by the way. So I don't know. I mean, I've said this many times, like rather famously, I feel like I have not read any of that stuff. I've read some of the comics over the years, but that's about it. But I finally embarked on a Star Wars extended universe journey a little bit, because I don't know. I'd started a handful of books. I just finished an autobiography, Bruce Campbell's follow-up autobiography to his original, If Chins Could Kill: Confessions of a B-Movie Actor, which is one of my favorite autobiographies. I would highly recommend that. But I just finished his follow-up to that, and it was good. But I wanted to go back to fiction after that, and I'd been so disappointed by the Dresden Files as a book, and then I'd been so disappointed by what was I forget what I tried to listen to before that was also super disappointing. But there were a couple things in a row after I'd finished like the totality of Brandon Sanderson's works that I was like, all right, where do I go? And then I thought, you know what? I bet the internet could recommend me some Star Wars books. And so they did. So I'm starting with Heir to the Empire, or Heir of the Empire, I don't remember, which is the first of Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy. Thrawn, you may recall from Rebels, probably, or both Clone Wars and Rebels.
So is this Thrawn trilogy, is this his original Thrawn trilogy, or has this one been updated so that it complies with
it's the original one, so it's no longer canon.
Oh, well, I have read those.
It doesn't apply anymore, apparently, but I'm excited. It's actually really well written so far, so I've been really enjoying the story.
It is.
And the audiobook version does a lot of sound effects and a lot of like music and stuff, which it's like almost over the line into radio drama for me. Like, it's not a whole cast of actors, so it's still like one reader for the whole thing, but he does a lot of voices, so that's helpful. But like, there's so much additional like sound effects and music and stuff in it that actually just starts to feel like a radio play, which I really like. It's a thing that I've been a fan of since I was a little kid. So
I listened to that same book into last year, and I had the complete opposite reaction. I hated the audio version.
I could understand that.
I thought his voice,
if you didn't grow up with that, or if you're not used to that, it'd be pretty weird for an audiobook.
No, I mean, it's fine if it with the sound effects, that's fine. It's the dude that's reading it, and his voices were comically bad, and I just didn't like it at all. Did not connect with me, and it just made me hate listening to it, even though the content's actually kind of interesting.
You could solve all of this just by reading the book.
I could.
That just putting that one out there.
100% true.
Do with it what you will.
Yeah. So I will say I don't usually I mean, unless it's like really badly recorded, or if, I mean, there are cases, obviously. I mean, there can be a bad voiceover, or, you know, there's can be a bad reader, right? Like there's not everybody is like, you know, like a Jim Dale or somebody like that. But I don't worry about that as much. I don't feel like, because I've listened to so many things over the years, but like I do. Like Dresden Files, for example, the reader was fine. I didn't really have a problem with him, but like I really had a problem with the way it was written. Like I find that first person thing is just really brutal for me, and I cannot get into it.
I mean, it's not for everyone. I personally didn't care for the reader for the Dresden File audiobooks.
He wasn't great. Actually
go out there and like buy one. I just listened to a sample.
He wasn't great.
Like, nope,
he wasn't great, but he wasn't my problem, right? Like he wasn't my beef. Fair was enough. With the actual Fair writing. Enough. So like if I went and got rid of the reader and became my own reader and just, you know, read the book on the page, I still would have hated the first person aspect of that whole thing. So it just wouldn't have changed for me a whole lot. But anyway, whatever. Point is, I'm going through going through is probably the wrong way to say this, but I'm embarking on a little bit of an extended universe journey here, just because I kind of want to know, like, where is the really, really good Star Wars that wasn't just the original series, right? Like where is that stuff?
I don't know if you could still find it in print, but if that's really where you want to go, I highly recommend the X-Wing.
Yeah, people recommended that one as well.
Books.
For sure.
Yeah. Both of them. There's one about Rogue Squadron that was written by Michael A. Stackpole. And then there was the Wraith Squadron series, which incidentally was the source of that story that I told on our Discord discussion about, you know, they're trying to bring this planetary government into the galactic, you know, collective, only to discover that there's not a planetary government. They still have like countries, like a bunch of savages. What's going on here? It was great.
Look, so this was an interesting question that a friend of mine brought up the other day, which is like, well, if Star Wars fans like complain about all the new Star Wars that comes out, like, are they really Star Wars fans at all? And I don't like that line of thinking, because first of all, there is a body of work that exists, right? That was sort of the original body of work, which is all of the original series stuff. And then you can even start talking about the prequels and stuff too, because that was all George Lucas. And by the way, the prequels, there's a lot of stuff I don't like about the prequels, and there's a lot of stuff I have problems with about the prequels, but like there is still like pretty unique vision in the prequels. That's kind of interesting now, looking back on it. Like, again, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that Lucas was never very good at, like dialogue, for example, that is really terrible in the prequels. And there's some boring stuff that shouldn't be there, you know, like, but that said, that feels weirdly a lot more Star Wars-y to me than a lot of the newer stuff has, especially in full context of like the modern trilogy. But then I look at it and I go, look, I'm a fan of the original trilogy. There are elements of the prequel trilogy that I like. I like The Mandalorian a lot. I liked Rogue One. I didn't hate Solo. Everybody feels kind of differently about that a little bit. I don't love Clone Wars, but I liked Rebels. On balance, there's quite a lot of Star Wars stuff that I've seen over the years that I actually quite like. And then I'm reading or listening to this book so far. I've actually really enjoyed that, because it's pretty well written. It's using, but this is where it's really interesting to me, is that like that book starts off with Thrawn, who is an Imperial officer. And then the next chapter, like chapter 2, is Luke Skywalker. And we're in it. And the characters that Lucas created, and I think that happened before the prequels may have happened even before the prequels came out. So like we're into it, where we're actually like continuing the story in a way that so far I've been really enjoying, and that like the entire internet that I asked, like everybody who replied, and there was a decent number of replies, everybody recommended this series. So that to me tells me that it is possible to play in this sandbox and even play with those characters specifically, like Luke Skywalker, for example. Han Solo's in like the next, like in the third chapter, or whatever, like is a Han Solo chapter. And there's like Leia stuff in it right at the very beginning. Like Luke, Han, and Leia are all right at the very beginning of that book. And they're all handled really well. So clearly it's possible to do stuff. And it's possible for like hardcore Star Wars fans to basically all agree that this is great. Like this is a great interpretation. So it makes me really like skeptical of this notion that like fans are just never going to be happy, or like that there's no way to do it. Also Mandalorian, right? Like we all were pretty happy with the Mandalorian. I didn't see fan backlash or whatever from the Mandalorian, right? So it's clearly possible. It's just that they're not hitting the mark most of the time right now.
Right. Fan blaming is really weird.
Yeah.
It basically boils down to is you're just too dumb to realize how smart I am. Yeah. And if anybody said that in real life, you just laugh them out of the room. But apparently it's okay for studios to say that. And
it's literally apparently okay for like directors and actors to say that about their fans, which is weird.
Yeah.
Super weird.
And I don't understand why they have this kind of like hate for the quote unquote fan, and because it's how you get paid. Like you want to make them happy.
I feel like they think that they're creating new fans, or that their old fans are like somehow inherently toxic. But like, again, when you look at the reaction to the Mandalorian, you don't see that, right? Like you don't see this like, oh, that's so terrible, or that's, again, and then a lot of this ends up in these places where we talk about sexism or racism or like various kinds of bigotry, because they're easy to sort of drop on the fans and say like, well, they're bad people. But you look at how people reacted to Cara Dune, you look at how people reacted to Fennec Shand, like all of these characters, like everybody said good things about them. Like everybody's loved both of those characters.
And honestly, the season finale of season 2 of The Mandalorian had one of the best exemplars of like girl power in an action sequence.
Yeah.
Like they nailed it where Avengers Endgame
and you don't
failed.
Even, and that's like, I think for exactly this reason, you don't even notice it while you're watching it. Like it is not even a thing, because they don't do like this girl like calling your attention to how girl power they are. It just
like they did not do the magical girl transformation finishing pose before they started kicking all of the butt. They just proceeded to kick the butt.
But also really importantly, and this is let's take the second to compare this to Avengers, because this is a really good comparison. So Mandalorian was the only male character on the hero side until Luke Skywalker showed up. Grogu, we'll take Grogu outside of
he doesn't count,
this, right?
He's a frog. Yeah, he doesn't count.
And also, like Moff Gideon, is an evil man, except for he wasn't presented as an evil man. He was presented as an evil guy. Like he was just the evil villain, right? Like it didn't matter. He wasn't like a bad man because he was a man. Like none of that was the issue. But the difference is all those characters were there on the bridge for reasons that made perfect sense, and for reasons that had been established clearly throughout the course of the series. So we know why Cara Dune was there. We know why Bo-Katan and her people were there. Like, we know why everybody was there. And once they got on the ship, we know why Mandalorian went one way and they went the other way. It all made sense, and it was all clearly written. Contrast that with Avengers Endgame, right? All of those, every single one of those female characters that ended up in that sort of final girl power pose was in completely different areas of the battle seconds before. They literally all just teleported into one place, many of whom do not have that kind of power. Like I get it if your Captain Marvel can be one place and then very quickly be another place, but like you're going to have to explain how Black Widow showed up. You're going to have to explain how like some of these characters just appeared out of nowhere, all to be in the same place just so they could do a cool pose. And it's that kind of stuff that I think drives people insane about it, and not the fact that it's a girl power thing, which again I think you can see over and over and over again when you actually look at those examples. I don't know. It drives me nuts. I feel the same way about like you're going back to Boba Fett, the little, Vespa gang could have been cool if any of those people were cool. Mm-hmm. And so you could have done like a cool, like weird mod squad thing of like teenagers or like 20 somethings that were actually like really, really like interesting, cool characters that came out of nowhere, but none of them were interesting characters. And I don't even remember any of their names. Literally none.
Did they have names?
Did they name them?
Dude, I don't know. They probably did.
It was just like Red Ranger.
I mean, that
Green
seems
Ranger.
more accurate to me, but like...
If they had names, I don't recall hearing them ever, but...
I feel like that whole Vespa gang thing on paper probably sounded way cooler than what the execution was. And that's kind of what this whole series felt like to me, is that on paper, this sounds awesome. If you say Boba Fett getting out of the Sarlacc, which everyone wanted to know, and he gets held hostage by the Tuskens, and then we get to learn more about Tusken. Okay, I'm there. And then we get to learn more about this Modder gang that's basically a Fast and Furious gang on Tatooine that has enhancements. And, all right, cool. Oh, and then you get to see Luke Skywalker train Baby Yoda. Sign me up. And then, you get to see a Rancor, King Kong. All this stuff sounds amazing. And
it should have been cool, but
it's just the execution was poor. So I think the writing is one thing, but I think the direction and I don't know. It just seems like nobody was really like it seemed like the
nobody's at the wheel.
The teacher was away right. Yeah. It's just kind of like, hey, here's the script. Go take it, Robert Rodriguez. And then, whoa, why are there Vespas?
Right.
I mean, clearly they were trying to write towards moments of cool, but that does not make a cohesive plot. No. And I am once again asking, why is this show?
Yep. Well, certainly not for Boba Fett. I said at the end of this, like, look, Fennec Shand was the actual crime boss the entire series.
Oh, for sure. And I would have watched the Book of Fennec.
I would have
Shand.
as well. But that was because she was allowed to do all the stuff that Boba should have been able to do, right? Like she was allowed to go take revenge on people and go like crush her enemies in ways that were aggressive and violent and whatever. And like, but again, it's Boba Fett. That's what I paid my monies to see, right? In theory, like I want to see Boba Fett be awesome. And instead, like every single person who's like, hey, Boba Fett, you're an idiot. And like, I hate you and I'm not going to give you any money and I'm not going to do what you say. And Boba Fett's just like, all right, man. Rude, but okay. I mean, literally like the whole scene of Boba Fett bringing all of his like all of the people that pay tribute to him like into a meeting, like all the business leaders or whatever, like come in and do the meeting, and they're all like, nah, I'm out, I'm not going to help you. And he's like, well, fine, just agree not, I'll just do it myself then, but just agree not to get in my way. And you're like, what kind of like all of the people were supposed to basically pay tribute to you and treat you as their daimyo, which by the way, how do we get Yakuza names inside Tatooine? I would like to know, but
it's Star Wars. It's
whatever.
It's
whatever.
I actually have very elaborate fan theory about that, but whatever. This is not
anyway.
The time.
Fine, but like they're supposed to revere him and see him as their lord, their like feudal lord, essentially, and they are all just like, nah, I'm not going to help. And he does nothing. He does absolutely nothing to any of those people. Well, not to any of those people. No. Just one of those people. But like pretty much nobody gets anything. I don't know. It's so weird. And it's like it's neutered, It's like the whole thing is like Disneyfied.
Yeah.
in a way that was like, dude, you brought. Oh, by the way, did you guys see? This is a tangent a little bit, but did you guys see that all of the Netflix MCU stuff is being taken away from Netflix? Yeah, so Daredevil and Punisher and Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, they're all going to be off Netflix at the end of the month, actually.
Where is it going to
be?
I don't know yet.
It's going to be in the multiverse.
Well, it is going to be in the multiverse, almost certainly. But the question becomes, like, you can't put any of that stuff on Disney Plus. So Hulu maybe.
Okay.
Where's it going to go? And also, why wouldn't you just leave it on Netflix where it was made? Right? Like, it's literally all been produced by Netflix.
Money.
Yeah, I just.
Yeah, I feel like Boba Fett, Book of Boba Fett, it had the two big problems. One we already talked about, which is the very differing directorial styles, and it feeling neutered, which is weird because the Mandalorian episodes were not neutered at all. So I don't understand any of this, but I think the main reason, and this might have been the reason that led to all the other decisions being made, but Tamora Morrison.
I know you've said this, man. You've said this a few times.
I've said this. So if you even just think about like time frame, Boba Fett should be probably early 40s, mid 40s. Tamora Morrison's in his 60s, and you can tell. And like, obviously you can't change how old you are and stuff like that. And he I get, but this is where fan service goes wrong. They should have had somebody else in this role and be like, he's just too old to play this character who we're supposed to believe is violent. And I'm guessing is that one, they didn't want to make Boba Fett the bad guy, but two, they also saw him and saw that he is probably just isn't a very good actor.
I think you're
like, yeah, we got to change
you're right,
this.
but I do think the bigger problem is they wanted to not have him do anything bad. Like they wanted him to be good guy in a Disney way, like in a really Disney kind of way.
Well, but they could have done the same thing that they did with Mandalorian. He just kills bad people.
No,
show the other guys be bad, and then
you can totally do it, but they seem to be.
When it comes to the action, Paul pointed this out on one of our live streams. Just have him keep.
I know that's really
the
solution.
You can put whatever stunt double you want to underneath that armor. Just have him. And also,
before we like get too hard on Tamora Morrison, he said he wanted fewer lines. Like he actually pushed for fewer lines of dialogue, and he wanted to keep the helmet on more, and he wanted to be in a position where he was more silent and like menacing in a quiet way, which is what Boba Fett was, right? Like that's the only thing we really know about him from the original trilogy is like he's just
full marks for effort on his part then. But
I think he had wanted to do something a little bit different, and which I think would have been better. And I agree with you, Paul, but I mean, I think we have like middle ground solutions here, which is like he can be the actor, but like seriously, put the helmet on and get a stunt double in there. We're going to do it anyway. I mean, it's not like there's not going to be a stunt double for the characters, so just put the helmet on and let him go to town, So I don't know. Let's wrap this up. I will say real quick, Hampton chimed in here. He said some of these Mod Squad characters were names were Scad and Drash. There are two of them anyway.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't remember any of that. That's fine. Sure. Also, quick shout out to Matt Berry as the voice of the what they kind of had as a protocol droid, 8D8. Matt Berry, if you haven't seen him, is in What We Do in the Shadows. Highly recommend Matt Berry as an actor and as a comedian.
He is hilarious. He's also in the IT crowd.
A lot of the stuff with Taika Waititi and those kinds of things. So I'm sure that was the connection there, but like also fantastic. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's give some scores to the Book of Boba Fett. Paul, let's start with you.
Well, I think it depends on if you like Star Wars, watch it because there's some stuff that you like. But I think overall, taking myself out of that, I would probably say no stars.
Dan?
The finale is one of the worst episodes of television I've ever seen in my life.
Which really is a travesty because the 2 episodes that preceded it were pretty good.
Right. I was going into that season finale. I'm like, okay, everything's
it's really
about to
a bait
set
and
off.
Switch.
We're gonna have some. Oh, it was so bad.
Yep.
Cad Bane just showed up.
Yep,
I'm like, oh yes.
Yeah, that's really funny to me because I was so down on the first 4 episodes, and then the 5th episode comes in, and I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe we're gonna turn this around, like coming into the end. And then, no, pure bait and switch. 2 episodes that were good, then wrecked it right in the finale. Oh, man. Jen.
I did the math. And those 2 episodes 5 and 6, are approximately 1/4 of the series. So this gets 1/4 of a star.
I think I'll do that as well. I think I'll give 1/4 of a star, purely as an A+ for Bryce Dallas Howard. That's Bryce Dallas Howard's quarter star. And that is it.
That's it.
I did not know I wanted a Bryce Dallas Howard directed Star Wars.
I think we do.
Movie.
100%.
That was fantastic.
Can I also just point out how funny it is that like everybody kind of is down on Solo, which was finished by her dad, obviously Ron Howard. I think Bryce Dallas Howard should have done Solo. Now I'm thinking like, what if she had done? Although
Ron should maybe retire.
To be fair, I would much prefer her doing a movie that was not a well-established known character. I would like her to go off and do like a new thing and not just go back and like retcon Solo. Because that probably just didn't need to be done.
The shot of the TIE fighters bombing Mandalore is then that whole that dream sequence is just just great. Yeah. But that just doesn't save it from the finale. It's
not nearly enough. But it was cool. So we got one good moment, and they'll mine that moment in Mandalorian season 3, no doubt. So, all right, we're gonna end it here. If you are a supporter of the show on Patreon or Subscribestar, it's patreon.com/outoframeshow or subscribestar.com/outoframeshow. Stick around. We're going to do some viewer questions right after this. But for everybody else, thank you so much for listening. Check us out on YouTube. You can find us as Out of Frame on YouTube, or, of course, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. And then join our Discord server where we have a lot of interesting conversations. We'll probably continue to do some live streams over there as well. So check us out on Discord. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.